We are over halfway through the college football season, and every team has played at least 6 games. Most teams have played 7 games. It feels like the playoff picture is starting to clear up just a little bit. It's starting to, again, become a little bit more clear as far as which teams really have a chance. Now, there are still a lot of teams that technically have a chance that have not been eliminated yet. But a lot of those teams we don't really think have a realistic shot. But we're going to look at the playoff picture here in the new eliminations this week. We'll start with those new eliminations. We got Houston, James Madison, Northwestern, Oklahoma State, Purdue, Rutgers, Sam Houston, and Stanford. All of these teams were eliminated this week. Let's look now at the playoff picture in the group of 5. So these teams out of the Mountain West and the American have already been eliminated. And we've actually had no changes in these two conferences. It still looks the same. Army, Memphis, Navy, North Texas, and Tulane out of the American. Boise State, San Jose State, UNLV still alive out of the Mountain West. And again, if you're in these two conferences, you can have 2 losses and still be alive. You can still have a chance. A Boise State with 2 losses would have a chance. A Memphis with 2 losses would have a chance. Not saying they would definitely get in, but they're definitely not eliminated. And remember, Army and Navy still undefeated. What a story that has been. You go to the other 3 group of 5 conferences. These teams all eliminated. And so you look at the updated picture. You've only got 3 teams, Liberty, Louisiana, and Louisiana Monroe. So no teams out of the MAC. And we've only got Liberty out of Conference USA, Louisiana, and ULM out of the Sun Belt. I feel like the team is going to come out of the Mountain West or the American. I even think, especially like a Boise State, if they finish with 2 losses, I think they probably even finish ahead of an undefeated Liberty. Again, the Conference USA is not very good. The Sun Belt's not very good. I think it's better than Conference USA, but still, I think it's going to come out of the American or the Mountain West. We'll see. All right, so now let's get to, first we go through these. Of course, these teams already eliminated. Notre Dame's still alive. If you look at the independents and the 2 teams out of the Pac-12 or Pac-2, whatever you want to call it. So Power 4 teams eliminated up to this point. Auburn, Cal, Florida State, Houston, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi State, NC State, North Carolina, Northwestern, Oklahoma State, Purdue, Rutgers, South Carolina, Stanford, UCLA, and USC. All of these teams have been eliminated, which means there's still a lot of teams, a lot of Power 4 teams that still have a chance. Again, a lot of them don't have a realistic, real shot, but technically they do still have a chance. But these teams, the 3-loss mark is the mark for most of these teams. But again, in the Big 12, I think you can win the Big 12 with 3 losses. So it's a little different with each conference. But these teams eliminated. Now let's look at the teams that have been eliminated from the at-large. So these teams would have to win their conference. That's the only way they're getting in. So like in Arkansas, they've got 3 losses, but they've only got 2 losses in the SEC. If they were to somehow get into the SEC championship and win that, they would be in. And so, yeah, these teams, they've basically got to win out. They've pretty much got to win out and win their conference. That's the only way they're getting in. So these teams really are on life support. They really, again, don't have a realistic shot of getting in unless something crazy happens, unless these teams just get really, really hot down the stretch. But we're talking Arizona, Arkansas, Baylor, Boston College, Georgia Tech, Iowa, Louisville, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, TCU, UCF, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Washington, and West Virginia. So these teams all eliminated from at-large contention. They've got to win their conference. So let's go to the conference, the contenders for each conference. We'll start with the ACC. SMU, Pittsburgh, Clemson, and Miami. I think it's clearly down to these 4 teams. Louisville now pretty much out of it with 2 conference losses. It feels like when you've got this many teams undefeated in conference play, you feel like a 2-loss team out of the ACC is not going to get in the conference championship. You might even have 2 or 3 undefeated teams potentially because Clemson, Miami, and SMU, they don't play each other. And so it's going to be interesting in the ACC for sure. Now, I said the other day, I don't really think Pitt is in this conversation. Or they're in the conversation, but I don't think they have a real shot at winning this conference when you look at their schedule coming up. You look at how they've been getting by in a lot of close games. I think the other 3 teams are better, but Pittsburgh is undefeated, so you absolutely have to have them in this conversation right now. And they've proved me wrong already. They may prove me wrong again as we go through the rest of the season. So, but yeah, it's definitely between these 4 teams. You've got a real shot, I think, of getting 2 ACC teams in the playoff. And that's what I predicted. Again, I picked Clemson to go 11-1 and then lose to Miami in the ACC championship. That's been my prediction from all the way back to the preseason, and that could still play out. SMU could finish 11-1, and they could lose in the ACC championship and get in potentially. Or Miami could go 12-0 and lose in the ACC championship, or Pitt. So I think you've got a really good chance of getting 2 teams out of the ACC in the college football playoff, and these are your 4 contenders. And again, this one seems pretty clear. Let's go to the Big 12 now. This was not as clear, but I think there's been a little bit of separation from these 3 teams. Kansas State has looked like the best team, in my opinion, other than that game against BYU where they really played bad. I still think this is probably the best team right now, but BYU and Iowa State are undefeated, and you absolutely have to put them in this discussion. Who is the actual front runner? It probably is BYU or Iowa State because they don't have any losses. They don't, they can lose a game and they're still going to be in that Big 12 championship more than likely. So, yeah, it feels like these 3 teams have the best shot. They've separated a little bit, but there are still 1-loss, 2-loss teams behind them that have a real shot. Again, I just think the way these teams have played, where they sit in the standings right now, I think these are your 3 top contenders. Now, how about the Big 12 getting 2 teams in? I think that's a real possibility. If BYU or Iowa State, let's say one of those teams goes 11-1, or maybe they both go 11-1, but Kansas State winds up winning the conference. We could have 3 teams potentially out of the Big 12, just like out of the ACC. It's going to be very interesting. What if we get 11-1 teams out of the Big 12 or the ACC? And then we get 10-2 teams out of the SEC or Big 10. How is the committee going to rank those teams? I mean, are you really going to tell me that the committee is going to put an 11-1 BYU over a 10-2, let's say, Alabama? I don't think the committee's going to do that. So we could have some very interesting debates here. It usually takes care of itself. The Big 12 is a tough conference. I feel like all these teams are probably going to lose at least one game, and maybe, we only get 1 team out of the Big 12. But that's definitely something to look at there as these teams out of the ACC and Big 12, potentially multiple teams getting in the playoff out of those 2 conferences. The Big 10, it's pretty clear here. Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. Yes, Indiana is now in the conversation. Again, I wanted to see them play Nebraska. They really haven't played any decent teams, but they look for real. Their schedule sets up really well. I think there's a very good chance they get to 11-1. This is another conference where we could absolutely see a 4-way. All right, there are a lot of different ways this could go. We could see a 4-way tie with a bunch of 11-1 teams. We could see Oregon go undefeated and a 3-way tie with Penn State, Ohio State, and Indiana, which that one would probably take care of itself because Ohio State would have beaten both and they would be in. But there are a lot of different scenarios. I feel like Ohio State's probably in the best situation in terms of tiebreakers because they play both Penn State and Indiana. If they win both of those games, they should be in. I'd say Ohio State probably controls their own destiny. Unless we, again, get a 4-way tie, and then what happens? I still think Ohio State probably gets in because they'd be 2-1 against these other 2 teams. So, a lot of different scenarios in the Big 10, but these are your 4 contenders. And, we now have to talk about Indiana as a serious contender. All right, finally, the SEC. Didn't think I would have LSU and Texas A&M. Well, I take that back. Preseason, I did think these 2 teams had a shot. I didn't know, and we're talking about top contenders here, so I probably should have done this a little bit differently because we're talking about top contenders to win the conference, and I didn't even think about this. I think Tennessee's got a really good shot at getting the playoff. I don't think they're going to get to the SEC championship because I don't see them beating Georgia on the road, but 10-2 gets them in. So, when I was doing this, I was really thinking about the top contenders to win the conference. And maybe next week I'll kind of divide that up because, Tennessee is still a top contender. Alabama is still a top contender. Other teams there, Missouri. But as far as winning the SEC, LSU and Texas A&M, they're undefeated right now. They're at the top. They play this weekend. You're going to have a team, whoever wins that is, I think, going to be in the driver's seat to get in the SEC championship. And then Georgia and Texas still have a great shot. If they win out, they've got somewhat favorable schedules. Georgia does have Tennessee. They do have to play on the road at Ole Miss. Texas does have to play on the road at Texas A&M. But those are schedules that they could could win out. They could absolutely win out with those schedules. So, yeah, these teams are your top contenders to get to the SEC championship. If we're talking playoff, again, there are other top contenders out of this conference for sure. Maybe not so much the other conferences that we've gone through, but when I was thinking about the SEC, I was thinking about the conference race. But yeah, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri. I'm probably missing someone there as well. But that's the updated playoff picture heading into Week 9. Would love to get your thoughts on all of this. Let me know how you see things shaping up down in the comments below.